And I'm going to now just ask Lila to rejoin us. We've got about 5 minutes of general discussion. So if you can take your chair at the end, and then I've kind of prepped her with a question just to ask for her reflections on the presentations that we've seen so far. So they range from quite technical through to legal, and then just for Lila to provide some reflections on what that might mean in terms of some of the politics and some of the kind of different, closing the loop back to the issue she was raising this morning.
Well, thank you. Those were great presentations. I wasn't expecting to. I don't have anything massive here to say. But I think maybe starting with the last one. I mean, obviously we've had a lot of range of things, so there's a lot of possibilities for the future, right from offshore continental shelves to sort of your sort of, the possibilities of AD and wastewater treatment, etc. So I think maybe a few questions. One is the question of the legality, the legal loopholes. What does that really mean? Who will have rights? How do you deal with that? Questions of extraction. I think, as you say, these are massive issues. And while there's a huge potential there, I mean, I could see dangers, possibilities, alarm bells, etc. But I think it's, and you said something about the right to water. I think that would be interesting to explore further what you were saying, whether you could actually use those resources to enhance people's rights to water, and then whose rights would count. I think that would be interesting. In terms of some of the innovation we've heard about, I think I would be interested in questions of the actual material outcomes of these innovations. So, what actually do we see in terms of resource use? Do things improve or not? How do these link with value chains and markets? AD is notoriously complicated sometimes in many contexts. So how is it applied? So I would be interested in some of those issues, and also what the actual material benefits are, how you do the trade-offs. Because sometimes you have nutrient recovery. What happens to that? Who accesses that? Are there markets? So how do you go along the value chain? In terms of the stakeholder participation models, agent-based models, I think fascinating stuff. Thank you, all three of you. And so for me, some of the questions, if I link to some of, because you've asked me to link it to some of my questions that I raised in the beginning, I would be interested in questions of consumption patterns, and changes. Are we looking at those things in our models, questions of political economy, land use patterns and change? Because some of that will have an impact on models and how they can be applicable in the future. And finally, around stakeholders, participation, I would be interested in power and social relations, whose voice comes to the fore. So even though you may have really interesting models like in Indonesia, in Tehran, who are the power brokers? How do things change? What actually happens? But fascinating stuff, and thank you for these excellent contributions.
Okay, and I'm just going to give each of the speakers just a chance to kind of respond in terms of how do you see this work linking into some of these bigger questions of politics and access and that kind of crossover. So I'm just, doing a little interdisciplinary experiment here to try and push your own disciplinary perspectives to take into account some of what you've heard. So if you can just... yes, all right, good, a volunteer, and then we're going to move in that direction. So you've got a chance to just make one relatively short point. Lights, yes.
Yeah, thanks for your presentations. I found they were all quite interesting. I think the first one was particularly interesting, considering what my PhD is focusing on. You focus on PPPs and how they function, essentially. And I think it would also be interesting to see how PPPs could be linked to kind of international technology transfer in providing some of the infrastructure that then maybe addresses issues of access, which my study didn't really do. So I think that would be an interesting way to take that forward.
Yeah, just a quick reaction on what you said on the right to water. Yeah, definitely. It's something to take into account. It could be a solution to fulfill this right to water. It would, in the case of like a shared offshore continental shelf aquifer between countries, and an agreement, bilateral agreement, it would definitely be probably taken into account in the list of factors on how they would negotiate, looking at the vital human needs of maybe one country over the other or whatever. But it's definitely something that would be taken into account. And it's really an interesting topic because it mixes, I mean, it forces us to really look outside of the traditional water sector, discuss more with also marine hydrogeologists. And here, yeah, for the last 2 days, it was really interesting to have so many different disciplines and so on. And that's how we can move forward, I think.
You
really
also have these massive ports on the coast, you have special economic zones, so in some ways those people also have a sort of monopoly on that resource, I would say. So that would be interesting too.
Great. Okay, and
Thank you.
your thoughts?
I think that a combination of science and technology and tools like these, modeling tools, modeling methodologies, optimization and things like these in combination with human expertise can provide very good insights and can be advisory, can help you make better decisions, and obviously can reveal a lot of patterns, like you said, consumption patterns. It's all depending about the complexity and the detail that you want to zoom in every time. And I think agent-based modeling, for instance, is a good start to simulate human behavior. Can give you quite good approximations about the needs and demands in clean water and sanitation. All of that as an approximation, of course, because I don't think there's any method that could realistically 100% simulate and predict human behavior in situations like this, and could be a very helpful tool to shape a more prosperous world for all of us.
Yeah, and I think we also need to reflect about how social and political sciences can inform the kinds of models that we do and how we build those models, and be aware of the politics that we code into our software, sometimes without necessarily being aware of that. Okay, Atiya?
Yes, thank you. Just to expand on what was just said about these land use different scenarios and consumption patterns. In the work I'm doing, it's difficult to incorporate that. So what we've only been able to do is to sort of weigh the different voices in regards to what kind of technology or what is the priority in the area, and sort of use that as an input into the model, the technical model that we're using. And that sort of weighs into the question of the power balance. In a monopoly, it really depends on to see who owns what. So in Iran, for example, the municipality, they are responsible for the green areas, but they need the resource, water, for irrigating the green areas, and they sort of have to buy that from the wastewater authority that owns it. And when I say buy, I mean something that's included in the budget. But however, so that's where the problem issue comes out. So in each condition, there's a different kind of power balance between different organizations.
Okay, and Radis?
Thank you so much for Tobias. Yes, based on my current survey, there are already feedback from the respondents. Yes, they also mentioned that the motive of their adoptions in PPP is one of the important motives is transfer technology from investor to local governments. That's very important. And then political economy aspect of PPP also important, especially when one of my questions that I need to address is the perception of private sectors in dealing with multi-level governance, especially why in some region and some municipality you are able to join the bidding, but why it's not in other municipality or another regions. And that's also interesting to be explored further. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. So thanks once again to all of our speakers. And now we've got about 15 or 20 minutes for coffee. Just can members of the UCL Water Group stand up so that you know who to... So Atiya and...
I think it's just
Oh, okay. Well, we've heard everything that there is to say. If you want to know more about that, speak to Atia. Okay, so that will give the contact details. Great. See you all at tea. Thanks.
Thanks to you.